is Mia.
Hello. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Mia, like she just said. Welcome to Notre Dame to those of you visiting. I'm a junior here studying psychology and on the pre-health track in the College of Arts and Letters. I'm so excited that y'all are here to learn more about this course as it holds a really special place in my heart. So during spring of my freshman year, I was introduced to sociology in general through taking Professor Terry McDonnell's intro sociology class. And towards the end of the semester, he introduced to us the idea of positive sociology. So we came to class on one of the last few days with brainstormed solutions to some of the disparities that we'd discussed throughout the first semester. And he claimed that there was a need for more of this positive sociology in addition to learning about the disparities that a lot of intro sociology courses tend to teach. Little did I know that this was something that he and his wife, Erin McDonnell, were actively working towards. Almost a year and a half ago, I think, around there, the professors McDonnell took on the challenge of creating a course where students would be provided with a sort of toolkit to become change makers, forces for social good. When they offered me the opportunity to have a role in this endeavor by working as a research assistant to them, I was extremely excited. It's been really amazing to see their hard work and dedication come to fruition as they've launched the course this fall. As a current student taking the class, I can attest to the fact that their mission to create change makers really is becoming a reality. The atmosphere of the class is incredible as everyone treats each other or trusts each other and is just very open to putting in the emotional work to become better people. And it's so energizing to work alongside and learn alongside really passionate individuals and to learn from professors who are so passionate about the content and the mission of the course. Terry and Erin McDonnell are both sociologists within the College of Arts and Letters at the University of Notre Dame. Terry is the Henckels Family College professor and chairs the sociology department, and Erin is the Notre Dame Duloc and Kellogg associate professor. Today they will offer a sampling of their course, Becoming a Force for Social Good, Sociology in Action, which blends cutting edge of social science, Catholic social tradition, and hands-on engagement to allow students to come up with real solutions to real problems. In this class, we learn how to cultivate trust, belonging, and care in the service of the social good. Please welcome Professors Terry and Erin McDonnell.
Everyone, a round of applause for Mia. Thank you, Mia. Okay, friends. Well, today we get to give you a bit of a thumbnail version of class. We interviewed our students and asked what are the kinds of things that we should be talking about that they're already learning, what can we present to you, and we've come up with the briefest of brief versions of all that content.
Yeah, we said, what should the adults learn? And they voted on like 12 things. So we're trying to give you the best possible option if you're not going to join us for the whole semester.
So very quickly, today's plan, we're going to talk a little bit about the class, what the class is, what's the purpose of the class. Mia's already given us a start there. We're going to do a little community building in here. That's something we do the very first day of class, is try to build a community like the community we want to see out there in the real world. We're going to talk about this idea of status threat, a sociological concept that is kind of essential for understanding why people might be motivated to behave in ways that aren't ideal. Because people sometimes want to be seen as good, but that gets in the way of them actually doing good, right? And so thinking about that tension. We're going to talk about other people's luck and your hard work, the idea of fundamental attribution error, and then introduce this idea of how to have good conversations across difference, even when there are obstacles to that. Okay?
And you're going to practice that. So generally, the course comes out of the observation by us that there are tons of sociology classes that are just problem. And then when you feel like good and depressed, we're like, we're out. And then when we tried to look for more positive models, one of the things we discovered is there are dozens of classes across the country that will teach you the science of happiness, but it's entirely individually focused. It will teach you personally how to improve your individual happiness. And as far as we can tell, this is the first class in America that is here to try to teach you how you can be a source of goodness in someone else's life. And we think that's a very distinctively Notre Dame thing to do. The class fulfills two core requirements. It fulfills Catholicism in the disciplines because it allows students to take reflective stances on their normative positions, to examine their values critically in conversation with Catholic social teachings. It also fulfills a social science requirement because we are constantly presenting them how social science can be a tool. Social science is not going to tell you what to believe in or what to value. That's where your values come from. We're not here to tell you what to value. But if you value something, social science can help you understand what is the best way to pursue that value. What are the tools that are most efficacious in getting that done? So we bring those two things together.
So now's a moment when we really need to teach students how to bring about the common good, right? Trust is in decline, trust in other citizens, trust in institutions. That we're seeing record lows in trust in medicine, trust in science, trust in education, trust in government, trust in people from the other political party, right? And so we need to learn how to cultivate conversations across difference to build the communities that we really want to build in our world. And the goal of this class is to really help skill up our students so they can do that work.
So today is really from the middle of class. So we're going to jump off from a concept that's really core to sociology, which is the idea of status. You probably have been in some field where you felt status around you. Status is that sense of the relative or comparative ranking that tells us that certain people, certain goods, certain groups are more valued and valuable than others. And this is literally everywhere. There is not a society on earth that does not have an internal status hierarchy to it. There is not a group you have never been a part of that doesn't have something like a pecking order or certain things that give you more or less status if you can do them within the group. On Notre Dame's campus, if you run around with a Michigan t-shirt, it's like not a great status marker. It's a huge behavioral motivator. We are built in to care a ton about status, to protect the status we have, and to aspire to higher status. And in fact, there's a good indicator that some of our deeply seated concerns about status come from the fact that for thousands of years in human life, status affected your life chances. Your status in an early human group gave you access to better food, better chances of survival, protection if you were sick, better opportunities to mate and reproduce. It was core to your survival. And we can actually see concerns about status reflected in primate groups and primate research still today.
I'm getting grape and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now. Gets again cucumber.
As you can imagine, the capuchin likes the grape better.
She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
Wow. Right. So even though it is unlikely that a status insult in your workplace today is going to lead you to starve or dramatically reduce your survival chances, we're still responding to them like that's true. This omnipresent confrontation with status in our social world is in kind of odds with what Catholic social teaching tells us about dignity. Because status is an inherently rank-ordered system. It says some things in people are better and more worthy than others. And the Catholic concept of dignity says Jesus Christ died for everyone in equal measure. We are all precious in God's sight. That we have an innate worth that has nothing to do with anything we have earned. And we all have the same amount of innate worth. We are all precious. We all have that dignity. So those two things can be at odds. We might crave the idea that we get recognized as people of dignity, that we walk into a room and people assume we are people of worth. So dignity isn't just an abstract Catholic concept. It often animates a lot of the ways that we feel. But then that comes into confrontation with the fact that we occupy these systems that are constantly possibly giving us signals that we are not as worthy as we would like to be.
So let's talk about some everyday ways in which status and dignity might be in tension, right? Just kind of bring this to life for everybody. There's some certain situations where you've probably felt less than, right? Maybe someone else has made you feel a little bit less deserving or not as good as someone else, right? One way this happens is through conversations around culture, right? So have you ever said or heard something like this? It doesn't have to be these exact things, right? You've never seen Pulp Fiction? Or you really don't know Curtis Mayfield? And then my wife will say,
No, I really don't know.
Like, what? Right? Like that, like, what? Really? Right? Like you just emphasize it even more to make them feel like less than, right? Then you must have read Margaret Atwood's novella, or I wouldn't be caught dead eating at Chili's, or Swifties are so basic, okay? So you get the idea that these are common, everyday kinds of conversations that happen, right? But one person feels a little better about themselves, and the other person might feel worse off, right? Okay. So I want you to reflect, how many of you actually said something like this to someone else before? I've done it, right? Probably most of us have done that. Yes, okay. How many of you have been on the other side, the receiving end of this kind of thing? Right? This is a very common experience. So I want you to take a second and reflect, right? Why did you say it? Right? Why did you say it and maybe say it this way? Right? Or how did you feel when you heard it? What was your response? How did you react? Right? Or what might you say or do when you hear this? Right? How might you push back, maybe? Right? There are a lot of kinds of responses, but you get the idea that there's a status difference here that's being evoked, right? And that might kick in lots of different kinds of responses. Maybe you felt feelings of superiority. You felt better than the other person because you knew who Curtis Mayfield was and they didn't.
I
right?
still don't, to be
okay. You might feel shame, right? Maybe you feel bad because you feel like you're supposed to know it the way that person reacted, right? Or maybe you feel ignorance. I should know things, right, that I don't know, right? And maybe you're behind the curve. You have that inferiority complex. There's something wrong with me if I don't know these things, right? Or maybe you have fear of missing out. You have FOMO, right? And you want to learn more, right? Maybe there's something cool that you're missing out on and you want to be one of the cool kids. So you can think about a response, right? Some of these are one-ups, right? You try to one-up someone to show that your taste is just as good as better as someone else, right? Or maybe you cover by trying to cover up your lack of cultural knowledge. You might immediately listen to that album to keep up, right? Oh, I want to find out what that is. I'm going to go watch Pulp Fiction. Or maybe you just call them a snob, right? You call them out for the way that they're treating you, right? Okay.
Or sometimes you just shrivel up and die a little. I know I've had that response too.
Right.
That's just...
So this is an example of status threat, which is a broad kind of category where people's statuses are in tension with each other, right? And someone feels more empowered and someone feels less than. So status threat is the perception or fear that one's social, economic, or political standing is being challenged, undermined, or diminished, either individually or collectively. That could be as a representative of a particular group, right, that you might feel under threat. What we've been talking about with these cultural examples is what might be called cultural status threat. People are jockeying for position based on their cultural knowledge and taste, right? Who has better taste than other people, right? And of course that varies by culture. Different societies value different kinds of cultural knowledge, right? So there's nothing innate about this. It's just about what's valued in that particular setting.
Of course, there are other kinds of status threat too. One of the ones that you might have heard of or been familiar with a lot from popular culture is group identity-based status threat. So as a woman, if someone comes in and says, oh, Professor McDonnell, and walks right over to the guy in the tweed and the beard, I might experience group status threat that says I, as a woman, am less likely to be seen as a knowledgeable professor. So there's lots of different group identities that you can experience status threat. Men can experience status threat. Women can experience status threat. You can experience it on the basis of your race, your gender, your religion, your sexual orientation, your class. We're not going to talk as much about those today because they are the kind of thing people talk about a lot more often. They're a little bit more familiar. The one we want to focus in on today is the one you might not have heard of or thought of before, which is moral identity status threat. This happens when we experience something that feels like a threat to our core identity as a good person. Because in addition to all of the identities that we hold that are valuable to us, most of us have a core desire to believe that we're a good person and that other people see us that way. And we might think that this is good, and that thinking of ourselves as a good person leads us to act in virtuous ways. And we're going to try to argue today that actually, in a kind of tricky way, sometimes being very attached to thinking of yourself as a good person can lead you to act in negative ways. Because when we want to feel like we're a good person, but someone calls us out over maybe not acting in ways that are like that, or being accused of not practicing what we preach, or maybe we take an action or fail to take an action, and in our heart of hearts we recognize in that moment that that is not in line with our values, we confront the idea that maybe we are not acting like a good person in that moment. And we are so attached to feeling like a good person that we can react in some sort of negative ways when we feel like our identity as a good person is under threat. So Thoughts from the room. We have all at some point felt like someone or like something we had done that we observed made us feel like, ooh, maybe that wasn't so good. How do we respond, or how do people, if you don't want to talk personally, respond when they come face to face with the idea that maybe something they've done makes them seem like they're not a good person? Thoughts from the crowd? Your first option to speak back. Yes, Mia, the shiny apple.
Rationalization or denial.
Okay, denial, a big one, like I didn't do that, or defensiveness maybe is a close cousin of denial, like I've got all sorts of reasons why I did what I did. Great. I've got 2 other students if I need to lean on a plant in the audience. Any of the grown-ups want to suggest how do people respond in general? Yes?
They might try to say that the other person deserved it in some way because they weren't being a good person.
Sure. So, like, often if you have children, you've seen the phenomenon of, like, one-upping things going wrong, and you're like, oh, we started with not sharing a ball, and now it's gone nuclear. So we can look at the idea of, like, oh, well, they deserved it, they did this to me, that's why I did that, so kind of offering an explanation or justification. Yes, ma'am?
Overly self-critical?
Okay, you could kind of turn it in and be really self-critical and kind of fall apart on yourself. Oh, what's wrong with me? Why am I so terrible? We can develop really negative internal monologues, which...
And that might make you avoid situations, right? And so it makes it hard for you to actually do good in the world.
Yeah, you might shy away from, yep. So, yeah, we could also ignore it. One thing we like to do is just not see the things that make us feel bad. We are remarkably powerful at that. So just try not to see the thing that makes us feel bad or makes us think, ooh, was I not a good person in that moment? We got defensive, seek assurance or affirmation. So another thing, if we're worried about feeling good, is to like really rustle them up. So maybe if I've done something like, my daughter is really annoyed that I'm going away for the weekend. So maybe I'll be kind of hustling her up for some signs that I'm like still a good mom and she still really loves me because I want to have affirmation of my moral worth. The hardest thing, of course, is the last one, which is like, do the hard work and grow yourself. Like, learn and do better next time. That's the hard one. You really got to buckle up to do that. One of the things that can contribute, particularly to the phenomenon that our friend over here mentioned, where we're like, oh, but that person did this, is a core idea from social science that is really one of my favorite things to teach students. And so I wanted to make sure, and our students wanted to make sure you got it too, which is what's called the fundamental attribution error. So when we make sense of things going on in others' lives, when we look at something that has happened bad to someone else, we're like, they deserved it, they weren't skilled, they didn't try hard enough, they didn't work hard enough. But when something goes right for someone else, we're like, they got lucky, or it's just because their dad knows the mayor. But conversely, when something goes on in our life, if something good goes on in our life, we're like, oh man, I worked so hard for that, I'm so talented. And when something goes wrong in our life, boy, are we aware of the structural factors that contributed to that. We, of course, are wonderful, and the world conspired against us. So just to like break it down for you, right? Good things happen to me, and I'm like, I look at the personal factors. I overestimate the personal factors. I'm hardworking and smart. But when good things happen to other people, it's structural. That's the explanation I lean into. I overestimate the structural stuff. And then, of course, the opposite. When bad things happen to me, the world is out to get me. And when bad things happen to other people, they deserved it. Now notice, the reality is, of course, that personal and structural factors are acting on all of us all the time. But if we cannot actually perceive that in others, it is harming our ability to engage with them in their full human dignity. It is going to make us say dismissive, cruel things, like they're just an idiot and they're not worth my time. And that is driving us apart. We need to try to bridge those differences by trying to approach in full compassion the fullness of everyone's life, both their abilities and their structures.
So to overcome this gap between, to overcome this gap and strive for dignity, we need to cultivate empathy and encourage dialogue across difference. We need to empathize like a champion today. Excuse me. You might think, in the ways that we talk about empathy out there in the public sphere, that empathy is an innate individual level characteristic. It's just part of your personality, right? You have it or you don't, right? It's a trait.
I'm an ENTP, right? You take a test and it just tells you.
Right. Yeah, she's got more empathy than me, and there's no way I'm going to be able to close that gap. But if you actually look at the research, and there's a guy named Jamil Zaki, who's a Stanford psychologist who's done incredible work on this, he makes arguments that empathy is a skill, right? It's something that can improve with practice, right? It can be learned. It can be part of a conscious choice so that you can make it into a habit, something that you lead with empathy in situations rather than work to find it later. Does that make sense?
We use the workout metaphor with the students because they're like a sporty bunch here. The idea that you got to work your muscles repeatedly in order to grow strength in them, that sometimes when you work your muscles, it's going to hurt a little at first.
He's done some work. So people who start to think about empathy as a skill, right? They actually come to that point of view, do empathy more, right? So they tend to engage empathy actively in their efforts, right? Rather than just kind of empathizing when it's convenient or when it feels right to them, right? They're actually looking to do empathy out in the world in ways that will make the world better, right? And so our hope is for you to start thinking about empathy as a skill and start learning about how to develop it.
And boy, if we want to talk about Catholic teaching on someone who did empathy when it was not convenient, of course we're going to talk about the parable of the Good Samaritan. So for those of you who are not familiar, it's a parable that Jesus teaches that's sometimes connected to what's called the greatest commandment, love thy neighbor as thyself. And the question, who is your neighbor? So what happens is a Jewish man is robbed and left bleeding along the roadside, and the rabbi and the Levite come and pass him by. But a Samaritan comes and not only helps him, but puts him on his own donkey, takes him to an inn, pays for the innkeeper to care for him for days afterwards, make sure he's bandaged and cared for. The thing we need to remember about this is that original listeners would have understood Samaritans to be subhuman enemies. And notice that Jesus doesn't just say, we, the righteous Jews, should help our subhuman enemies. He says our subhuman enemies are our neighbors who are capable of loving and helping us, of providing extraordinary help and compassion across difference. That's a really challenging message to receive that's still vital today because we still have contemporary Samaritans doing that work of bridging incredible difference in society with people who they might rightly understand to hate them.
So let's look at just a brief example of one of those modern day Samaritans, right? Daryl Davis is a black man here on the left who made it a project to engage with Klansmen, right? And have conversations with Klansmen. And over time, he reports having had 200 Klansmen turn in their robes after conversations with him, right? Once the friendship blossoms, the Klansmen realize that their hate may be misguided. When two enemies are talking, they're not fighting. If you spend 5 minutes with your worst enemy, it doesn't have to be about race, it could be about anything. You will find that you both have something in common. Even this thing which, these stark racial relations, right, and the ways in which that has been such a hurt to our society, and the harms that it does to people, right, Daryl Davis is able to do the work of overcoming that difference, right, through empathy.
And through conversations across difference,
Yeah. So here's Pope Francis kind of calling us to action in this way. He says, despite obstacles, differences, and varying perspectives on the way to achieve peaceful coexistence, this task summons us to persevere in the struggle to promote a culture of encounter. This requires us to place at the center of all political, social, and economic activity the human person who enjoys the highest dignity and the respect for the common good. Right? We are being called by the church to do this work, right? To treat people with dignity, to look for encounter rather than just ignoring the possibility of encounter. We can't build this culture without having that encounter. So, if we're to embrace this culture of encounter, we need to then learn how to have conversations around difference and across difference. We need to develop this as a skill.
And how timely, because Thanksgiving is coming, I'm sure. So there are lots of ways we encounter conversations across difference in our lives. There are formal institutions built around conversations across difference, and I've studied some in my research: conflict mediation, listening circles, contact groups. But we also, in our everyday life, encounter different kinds of conversations across difference. Some of them are planned, some are unplanned. They can be differences in terms of different life experiences. So if I had a wonderful conversation with a Notre Dame alum who graduated in 1945 and was very verklempt about the Irish fighting leprechaun instead of the former mascot, we had a great conversation about what Notre Dame was like then. He's had a totally different life experience than I have. You can also have conversations across differences of ideas. You disagree fundamentally about what should be done or how something should be done, and you do not need me to suggest how in America you could find some topics to disagree with. I'm sure you could find some. So we're going to talk, I'm going to give a teach out on some strategies grounded in social science about how to more effectively have conversations across difference. We gave you a printout to take home with you because we would love this to be a practice that grows in your life. Maybe you can check it while the mashed potatoes are in the oven or something. We're going to go over this, and then at the end, we're going to give you a scenario for you to critique and improve. So if you thought you were just going to get to listen to the talking heads, incorrect. The action is coming for you. So perk up your ears. I know it's 3:30, but here we go. Things that help you practice active listening. So active listening is one of the most well-studied forms of encouraging things. It builds actually on social science of how we do interviews with people. It includes things like body language. So the body language that you give can convey that you're active and attentive. I'm going to say right here with the Coca-Cola can, right, you vibe like a great student, like leaning forward. This is the finger pose, it was sculpted. This guy's all in. Sometimes you can see someone in the back row who's like slouched, their phone is on their lap. Body language, I can tell that person's not in. The same thing is true when you're talking to another human being. The body language that you give, mirroring is using similar body language or gestures that that person is using. It puts them puts them at ease. Positioning, so sitting at like a V to each other is often kind of comfortable, or facing each other. This is kind of weird for most people culturally as a conversation, but sometimes, and I'm here to say the research actually suggests teenagers love conversations like this in a car, because it's a little bit less intensive if they don't have to look at you. So there are exceptions to that. Paraphrasing or summarizing to check understanding. So people like to feel understood. Often people cannot come to the table to understand you until they feel like you've understood them. So taking moments in the conversation where you say, okay, what I think I'm hearing you say is, and then say it back to them. It helps them understand that you have been fully present with your attention to understand the issues that they're bringing forward. Ask appropriate follow-up questions. They mentioned that they didn't have their mom around the first time they had to go shopping to buy things for their dorm. They were with their aunt. Ask a follow-up question about, how is it different with your aunt than it would have been with your mom? It shows that you've been paying attention to the details. Stay neutral and manage your emotional reaction. If you can't do this, this is a timeout moment. If you cannot genuinely, in your heart of hearts, stay emotionally neutral, you're not ready to have this kind of conversation. It's probably going to escalate in a bad way. Be patient. It's okay to let some silences linger. Let people have space to roll the ideas out. Don't jump in. Don't interrupt. And then you can also take moments to name the underlying emotions. So like if you see someone who is maybe struggling to articulate or touch base with what's going on, you can say like, I can tell you feel really frustrated with this, or I can tell you feel really angry about this. You're telling them that you're present not only to the words that they're saying, but the experience that they're having. Now, active listening, it's kind of a cupcake when you're talking about something you want to talk about and everything is joyful. How do we do this when we have a difference of something, when it's a challenging difference for us? So one really important step is validation. So one, you can focus on validating the person and the experience, even if you don't agree with their view. I'm guessing when Daryl was sitting down with the Klansmen, he wasn't like, I completely agree, I validate your feelings about white supremacy. I'm sure he didn't validate that. But you can still validate the person, you can validate the relationship, you can validate the fact that they trusted you enough to come to you and talk to you about this. Those things can all be valuable too. Because one of the things we find most consistently in social science is that when people feel safe in their belonging, when they feel assured that you see them as a fundamentally good person who might have made some choices or hold some views you don't agree with, it is easier for them to come to a growth resolution to that than it is if they feel like those things are threatened. If that person feels like you don't think they are a good person and they don't belong in your community, they are not going to be able to hear anything else.
Can I just say,
Yeah.
So Daryl Davis is a blues musician, and oftentimes music is something that he found as a way to have conversations with people as a kind of an icebreaker, right? Something that they can both find some agreement on.
Seek permission for feedback. My teens in the room. Look something like, I have a suggestion about how to go about this. Are you open to feedback? And sometimes my son will be like, nope.
Maybe more often than not.
And then we have to honor that, right? He is honestly saying he's not there for that right now. And then that's fine. Now we know. Use I statements. So what do those look like? We're going to avoid those should and make me statements. And then use things like, I would feel sad if that happened. Or, I feel concerned when you say that. So you're expressing, you have an entitlement to your emotional state and response, but none of this like, you make me so mad. Nobody makes you so anything. You are a grown-up driving your own emotional bus. So we don't want to get into like a blame game around that. You're just sharing your emotional state when you speak like that. Always, we encourage you to monitor your emotional response. So if you get to the point where like the anger is so loud that all you can think about is the way you want to interrupt and prove how right you are not ready for that conversation to continue. And so sometimes we talk to the students about having a parachute phrase that you've prepared in advance for this conversation, where you're like, I really value this conversation and I want to continue it another time, but I need to step back and take a break. I'm not ready to continue right now. However you've worked out your parachute phrase, that it's going to be a kind thing and you know it and you've got it in your back pocket for if you discover that your emotions are not in a place where you can really approach this with a view of compassion and dignity. And possibly also another tool in the toolbox is something called perspective taking. This one I love when my children do it. They're really good at it. But essentially it's like, how do you think the other person would feel? So this also can be something that can reduce a lot of the defensiveness. So if you say like, well, this happened, and when I did that, I think Liam probably felt really mad that I went back on my word to him. Right away, her brother is like, well, I did feel that way, thank you. And so like, it's so validating to hear that someone understood what you were going to, sometimes even without you having to explain it to them. It can really let the air out of a conflict. But we have to consider power when we think about that. Is there a slide on this? Am I about to?
Nope.
There's really good research about the idea that when groups have differential power, often they found that both the group that is in power and the group that has less power feels better about the encounter if there's more listening to the people whose voices were quieter. So in a corporate environment, for example, where women might be disempowered in leadership, if you have men and women both talking about their challenges in the environment, they're actually not going to walk away as happy as if the man just takes time to listen to the female executive who's having challenges with leadership. They both actually report feeling better about that encounter.
Okay. So we want to build a bridging mindset, right? The idea is that we want to develop a mindset that when you're going into these conversations, the goal is to have that bridge that's built, right? The goal isn't to win. Right? The goal isn't to show how smart you are and how your perspective is better, right? To build the trust that we need, right? You need to have a bridge that's built between the two conversation partners. And so there's a lot of ways we can think about doing this. So first, the goal is understanding, not persuasion, right? You're not trying to persuade them to some other position. You're trying to get to understanding. Only until you have mutual understanding can you start doing the work of persuasion. It's going to take time, right? So the heart of bridging work lies in trying to understand someone else's perspective, even if it's not your own.
And also, what we should say is like, Daryl Davis didn't persuade the KKK by saying like, that's wrong, right? In those conversations, they discovered for themselves, because they could see his humanity, how wrong their views were. So often the persuasion work isn't that I persuade him, it's that in our conversation, he persuades himself.
It's grounded in dignity, right? Again, this is a theme for our conversation today, right? You may not find common ground or compromise. You may disagree vehemently, but you still have to do the work of seeing them in their full human dignity, right? You have to see them as a human being that's worthy of your attention, worthy of your care. This is a key kind of foundation for building that bridge. It requires modesty. You have to accept that you don't have all the answers, or that your point of view isn't the only point of view, right? You have to be really open to those alternatives and curious about other ways of seeing the world. It involves some risk, right? It requires vulnerability, where you have to open up your heart to other people, right? And maybe people who hate you or don't think you are deserving of care, right? Opening yourself up is difficult, and those overtures may be rejected, or you may be disappointed, but you or they might be changed by what you hear in those conversations. It's emotionally heavy and taxing work, right? You have to kind of have some forgiveness for yourself for the kind of emotional work that happens, and maybe you start feeling yourself going out of control, right? But it's important to kind of recognize and be willing to acknowledge that emotional work and step away if you need to, right? You always want to assume good intentions, right? If you feel yourself taking offense, you have to do that work of stepping back and detaching yourself from past experiences of hurt. And sometimes you're not ready to do that. And so maybe that's a sign you shouldn't have that conversation yet. You have to do some work to kind of get there. But you want to assume the good intentions of the conversation partner.
And if at some point you don't and you're still ready, you can say, I'm not sure I understood what you meant by that. Could you explain to me a little bit more what you intended when you said that? So that you can, because sometimes people will explain it to a way that helps you understand that it wasn't meant to be harmful, even though your first instinct was to take it that way.
And there's a way in which it's kind of easy to kind of feel that you're being called out as you're part of a group as opposed to being seen as an individual, right? And your full human dignity, that you just kind of get collapsed into a stereotype, right? So there's a need to make sure that you're maintaining that person's dignity as an individual. So you want to give them more individual features and agency rather than seeing them as a stereotypical group member. You can do this by talking about things that don't trigger those stereotypes, right? So asking about mundane things like, do they like broccoli?
There was
right?
actual research on this. Actual research on like knowing and thinking about whether someone likes broccoli or not helped them decenter negative stereotypes that they held up in the group and see the person more as an individual.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things we do, and this is in the worksheet that we've given out, is there's some work to suggest that maybe the first conversations you have aren't about that difficult topic. Right? Maybe they're about more mundane things where you're just trying to learn about the other person. So you have a whole list of questions in that handout that are kind of get to know you questions. You don't have to ask them all, but it's the kind of thing where it gives you some ideas of how to start those conversations and build that trust. So slowly but surely you can get to that point where you can have those more difficult conversations across
And we did not draft those conversations. They also come from heavily validated social psychological research that has been shown to improve connections across people, even strangers who ask them. So that's where we get them to.
Great.
All right, so we've given you a lot of how to be, but man, the devil's in the detail. And as our students know, we have a strong emphasis on rehearsal because there's a lot of good research that rehearsing behaviors in advance, especially new, uncomfortable, prosocial behaviors, helps you enact them in the moment when they come forward. So, okay, we're going to practice our conversation now. My script writing debut called You Want to Major in What? So could we please have 2 volunteers to dramatize the hopefully somewhat relatable encounter?
Someone will play the role of the parent and one will play the role of the student. Volunteers?
I'll volunteer.
All right,
Okay, great.
excellent. Anyone else?
Anyone want to volunteer as a student?
I'll be the student.
A student,
Excellent. Okay,
Okay.
take it away, gentlemen.
Are we following this?
That's what
Yep.
you're following. Now, for everybody else, I want you, as you're listening to them, to be thinking, where are moments where this is not practicing some of the positive techniques we just told you? You can take notes, underline them in the script, because that's what we're going to talk about next. Where did it go wrong, and what should we do instead?
Oh, so I looked at the online course list for next term. Underwater basket weaving 201. What even is that?
It's part of the marine arts track. It's creative work using natural minerals underwater.
Ah, come
It's-
on, sweetheart.
Yes.
You have to stick to the pre-med coursework or you will fall too far behind. You don't have time for nonsense like basket weaving. You're good at science. Remember when you got an A in AP Bio? You'll make a great doctor.
I don't want to be a doctor. I've told you that.
You'll change your mind. Everyone does. You're too young to know what you really want yet. You may think you know, you really don't. Use sense. Medicine is stable, respected, well paid. You'll be setting yourself up for life. People always need doctors.
That's your plan, not mine. I actually like what I'm studying. It's creative, it's hard work, and it's meaningful to me.
Meaningful. Baskets underwater, what kind of job does that even get you? How are you going to support yourself?
I'll figure it out. Not everything has to be about money. You don't even care what I want or why I like it. You just assume it's stupid without even knowing anything. I'm an adult. I'm not some little kid anymore. You don't run my life.
Watch your tone. I'm still your parent. I know what's best for you. I've been around longer than you have. I've learned from my mistakes. I've learned from mistakes in my life, and I don't want to see you making choices you will regret later when it is too late.
Exactly. Your life, your choices. You don't get to make mine for me. Stop trying to drive my life. It's my life.
It's my money paying the tuition.
Ugh! All you ever care about is money. You don't care at all about me. You don't care about understanding what matters to me.
Don't be so dramatic. Oh yeah, sorry, lost my mind. I'm just trying to help you make the right decision before it's too late. You'll see. Someday you'll thank me.
The right decision for you. You don't even hear me. Every time I try to talk, you talk over me.
You're not listening to reason. You'll regret this in 5 years when you're broke and living at home.
I'd rather fail doing something I love than succeed at something that makes me miserable.
Okay, first of all, drama
Yes.
credit.
I mean, here's the question. Anyone know what the current, like, Screen Actors Guild rates are? I mean, we gotta pay these folks. They're great.
Okay, so let's start with, we talked about status threat. How did our two people in this encounter experience some kind of status threat in the encounter they just had? What threats were they experiencing to their status?
They weren't going to change their minds.
They certainly were dug in, very dug in, talking past each other, not hearing each other, yes?
Dad thinks he's the authority and that's being challenged.
Yeah. I am preparing to let go of my son, and like it's going to be like a 2-year on-ramp to me being okay, like not being his like active decision maker, co-pilot, anything. So dad's authority being challenged, dad's wisdom maybe being challenged, like the kid is kind of discounting the value of his wisdom. How about the kid? Is he experiencing some status threat? Young people.
What's the source of,
He's not being validated at all.
Yeah.
In any of his decisions.
Yeah, were you going to add to that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, he feels a lack of support from his dad, in terms of like, he wanting to go on like the path that he wants to choose.
Yeah, they're in emerging adulthood. They want to be seen that you trust them to make good choices in life, and that is not happening.
they want
Okay.
to be seen as independent and autonomous people, right? Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the ways in which this goes totally wrong and sideways from what we just presented you about active listening and dignity across difference? There's many to choose from, so have a field day. Let's hear from the audience. Condescending. So what specifically were some of the words that felt condescending?
Well, like, you don't know what's best for you. I'm paying the bills. I mean, there's a lot of condescending and bothersome.
Yeah. Has anyone loved it when someone said, you don't know what's best for you? Like, has anyone been on the receiving end of that and been like, oh, no. I saw another hand come up. Yeah.
Because no one's actively listening to the other person at all.
Right. Yeah.
Entitlement, it's my money, I have this is status and you don't,
Yeah. So claiming different status is a way to try to one up the other person, talking right past each other. Do we see any moments where someone shows they've been listening, affirming anything in the other person's world or view? No. And now, I actually think this is a fairly believable conversation, if I do say so myself. I'm sure versions of this have happened in the world. So now how would we fix it? So I'm going to ask you guys to take about 5 minutes talking to the people around you and try to rewrite parts of the script using the principles we gave you before to make it a more positive interaction, using that active listening, using that dignity across difference. And then we'll ask you to report out some of the script changes you made.
And you have a lot of the stuff from the slides in the handout with you, so you have that as a reference in case that helps. Okay? Go forth.
All right, so coming back to the large group, Hollywood rewrites fresh off your pens. What are some of the changes you put in to try to move this conversation in a direction that would have a more positive outcome for everyone participating in it? Yes, sir.
I think the parents should begin the conversation not by challenging one of the courses that he's taking, but ask him, son, you have a semester coming up. Tell me about the courses that you're going to be taking and which ones you like and which ones you don't like and how these courses are going to prepare you for your life.
Great, so right off the bat, we have asking from a place of genuine curiosity. I want to understand your perspective. What are you taking? Why do you like them? How are they preparing you? And for all you know, he's got some internship lined up with who sells baskets? Like some home decor, containerstore.com, like he's got the inside track on being the next hot thing in baskets. And if he could tell you that, we might have avoided a lot of the conflict, but he would at least start feeling heard and valued. That's a great start. So right off the bat, we've got a different start. What other changes did we make?
There's a question you could ask right off the bat is, why did you choose underwater basket weaving, and what use is it? What do you see?
Yeah.
The value in it. And maybe before you do underwater basket weaving, you should do a scuba diving course first. Or something.
Get your safety handle. Yeah, and so notice too that sometimes really subtle differences in our tone and the way we phrase things can also make a difference. Because if you say, why did you choose basket weaving? That's going to come off a lot different than like, tell me how you decided to take basket weaving.
Yeah.
Like those things are going to vibe in a really different way. So that place of genuine curiosity spilling over into our words is going to be really helpful.
That's one of the things we talk about in class a lot, is that distinction between why and how questions, right? So why already makes you feel like you have to justify yourself, right? But how kind of walks you through the process of how you got there, right? And so that difference really opens up bridging in really powerful ways.
Other edits. Yes, in the back.
So when the dad realizes he doesn't like medicine, I might phrase it, so help me to understand what it is you don't like about medicine. You know, you've been studying it for a couple of years.
Yeah. So that could also be for at some level the dad might be letting go of a dream, and that might be helpful. Like if the son says, well, I did a practicum and every time I saw blood I had to run to the corner and vomit profusely. Like that might be good information for you to have. Maybe it's not a good track for this. So like that helped me understand where you're at, what you don't like. Again, from that place of curiosity.
We're giving a hard time to dad. Are there any things that the child could do?
We got hands up in the back right away, yes?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, alternatively, like, if the student could kind of see what the parent's perspective is in terms of that, they probably don't want that person to struggle. And so getting and being a physician is a less harder way to do that versus basket weaving. So when they say, you will make a great doctor, if the student could say, thank you, but that's just not the path that I want to take.
Now remember, this is also a moment where we can validate good intent. Before we get to that, I want to say a big point is like an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, but also both parties in any conversation are the ones who can initiate a positive transformation. Like somebody has to have the gas in the tank to put on their big girl pants and say, I'm going to engage us in a healthy way, and then you can get a positive cycle going. So it could be the student who says, Dad, I know that you love me and you really want the best for me because you struggled in life and you are concerned that I'm setting myself up for a situation where I might have really unstable employment. That feels a lot different as a parent. He's essentially repeating back what he knows to be the underlying beneficent motivation for Dad's action. It casts Dad's action in an understanding light. And maybe Dad could say, and I understand that you feel passionate and you see the world differently than I do. And that this is something you really care about and you feel optimistic about your future in this. So like if they can do that validation work, can you feel how that like makes some of these statements much less likely to occur once we've done some of that validation work?
Absolutely.
Any other edits you made or thought about?
When the student gets interrupted, so just letting each other like have the time to speak and so it's broken.
Yeah. Again, who loves being interrupted? Nobody.
Wait, what?
And so some of those turn-taking things, giving a pause, making sure someone's had a chance to talk. He's teasing a little bit, but also he likes to pause for longer than I like to pause when he's thinking, and sometimes I mistake that for a period, but it's an ellipses. And so learning like what someone's tempo is important so that they feel heard. Yeah, did you have one too?
Just I think some of the emotion and just instead of the don't be so dramatic, which is just very antagonistic and judgmental, you know, it sounds like you're frustrated, somewhat way of rephrasing that, so acknowledging the emotion but not calling it out.
Yeah, so another thing I want to flag for you guys here is it is never too late to get on the ramp to Positiveville. It is going to be harder work if you let it flare up first than like my friend here started us on a positive track from the get-go. But let's say you catch yourself in a conversation like this and you're like, oh, those professors, shoot, I'm doing that thing. There's still a place for you to say, I can hear that I have really hurt you. I'm really sorry about that. Can we start over again? And to turn in that moment, I can hear you're frustrated with the way I've been talking to you. I want to validate that I understand. I would have been frustrated when I was 18 if someone didn't think I knew what I was doing in my life either. And I didn't mean to convey that to you, and I can see that's what happened. So it is never too late to get off the negative cycle and back onto a positive cycle. Now, in that moment, he might say like if it's my son, he needs to like stomp around and get a snack first before he's ready to like talk. And sometimes that's going to happen. You're going to say we need to take a break before we come back and finish this conversation. But it's always there for you. That positive path is always there for you to go.
Okay. We're going to give you all an assignment.
So I want to say this is how the class is structured. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. Look at that. The class involves teaching and then doing some modeling in class and then giving them a lab, which is like learn, act, and debrief. I can't remember where I got the B from. Anyway, it's a lab. They have to go do the thing. And so we gave our students the intentionally having a conversation across difference. And it was very, very powerful. The students have been so genuine and vulnerable and honest with us in these reflections that they did. One of the students wrote, probably in like a high point of my teaching career, that they had had this conversation with their parent multiple times and it had always ended in shouting. And that they used these techniques, they brought it to the table, and it was the first time they'd gotten through a whole conversation on the topic without them screaming at each other. And I thought, wow. So I just want to put it out there for you if you're interested in trying it.
Okay, so this is pretty much word for word what we've given the students to do. We ask you to invite someone to coffee who you disagree with on an issue that you care about deeply, or who has a very different life experience from your own. So the goal here is to have an authentic experience and earnest conversation where you seek mutual understanding and dignity, even if you never come to agreement. Your goal is not to persuade them to your position, to pressure your conversation partner to participate if you or they are not ready, right? So then use the skills that you started to develop today, use those handouts. If you take that QR code, if you want to take a digital copy, you'll get all the tips in a Google document that you can get right there. And so take those skills and use that handout, or just take the paper with you to kind of think about how to do this well, focusing on active listening, bridging across difference, and considering dignity. And we both encourage you to tell us how it goes, right? So if you feel like you got further than you've ever gotten before in a conversation, those are our email addresses. It's emcdon2 and tmcdon2@nd.edu. If it goes horribly, we'd love to hear that too. Why not?
I'm going to tell you one other thing that we haven't referenced yet that is in your handouts that we did in class. We thought it might be a little woo-woo for you today, but it's based on a meditation technique. So the idea is in advance of dealing with someone or a group that you might have discomfort with, it's a meditation practice that was developed to help you think about how the person that you are encountering or the group that you are encountering is just like you in many really fundamental ways. They want to be happy just like you. They are nervous and concerned about their well-being just like you. And I have added some specifically Catholic reflections at the end for those of you who are Catholic that might touch you to think about how they are born in the likeness of God just like you. So we read this out loud for the students in class for them to think about, and we encourage you to think about someone, you don't want someone who's like the worst person in the world to you who has really, really harmed you horrifically that you can't imagine caring about. But choose someone on the scale of 1 to 10 who's like a 6 level of harm. You can actually make real progress towards like finding space in your heart to engage them empathetically by trying to think about in advance all of the ways in which you do have human things in common. Questions?
Oh.
Well, I was inviting somebody to coffee or whatever,
Yeah.
to get involved in this.
Yeah, beer is fine too.
But do you, is it like you open up saying, look, here's what I would like to do today?
Yeah.
I mean, do you kind of explain where you're coming from?
Yeah, we encourage.
Introduce it.
You don't want to spring it on somebody, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, we did have the students do that. So they might say, I know that we have different views about abortion, but I would really like to learn to understand your perspective better. Would you be willing to talk to me about it? It also gives that person, some people are like comfortable talking right off the cuff, but some people need a little bit of an on-ramp to think about things in advance. And so it gives them a little bit of that time. And it allows them to also ethically say, I don't want to have that conversation.
Right, they don't want to do it.
Other questions about anything? Your maybe homework or anything else?
Okay, well, with that, go out in the world, be a force for good, make some difference out there. And then go Irish this weekend, right? Woohoo!
Exercise.